Hello, welcome again. My name is Emmanuel Odrojuma and I'll be your trainer for this entire series. If you have not subscribed to this channel, subscribe to it. Turn on the notification button to get alerted when a new video is posted. If you like this video, hit on the like button. This lesson will concentrate on CSS selectors. So we are going to learn how to select elements on our web page to be styled. To help me demonstrate CSS selectors, I've created a simple HTML web page for that demonstration. I'll show you what I did. So we talk about semantic tags in our HTML series, and for the simple web page that I've made for the CSS selectors demonstration, I've created a header. I didn't include a nav section, I didn't include an aside section, I didn't include an article section. So I created a header, 3 sections, and a footer. So semantic tags are used to organize the body of our web page. Semantic tags are used to organize the body of our web page, structure the body of our web page so that browsers and search engines would understand the structure of our web page. So for the simple web page that I've created the header, I've created 3 sections, and I've created a footer. So let's head back to VS Code. So you see that for the body part of my web page, I've created a section for the header, and within the header I have a heading tag within the header. So within the body I have a part for the header. I've created the heading, welcome to my first website, in that particular header. So this is the header being displayed on our page. This is the header being displayed on our page. The next part that I did is the main part of the body. So after the header, I also created the main part of the body, and within the main part of the body I have 3 sections. So this is the first section, this is the second section, and this is the third section. So within each section I have a heading and a paragraph. Within each section I have a heading and a paragraph. Within each section I have a heading and a paragraph. So after the main part of our body, I moved on to create the footer part of our body. And within the footer I only have a paragraph with a copyright symbol and this text. For the first section we have a heading and a paragraph. Second section we have a heading and a paragraph. The third section we have a heading and a paragraph. And this is our footer with the copyright symbol and this particular text. So this is the simple web page that I've created to demonstrate CSS selectors. Okay, so let's talk about CSS selectors. Now, from my web page, you see that I've used an external style sheet. I've linked an external style sheet to my web page, and that particular style sheet is found in a folder called CSS, and the name of the style sheet is styles.css. So if I check my file tree, notice that within my project I have a folder called CSS, and I have my CSS file called styles.css. So I've linked this file to this particular HTML page using this link tag. So my CSS, my styles.css is already linked to this particular page. May head to see my CSS file. So the first selector we are going to talk about is the element selector. The first selector we are going to talk about is the element selector. So when you look at my web page, you see that there is a heading element here. I used H1. This particular heading used H2. There's a paragraph element, an H2 element, a paragraph element, an H2 element, a paragraph element, and another paragraph element. So if I want to style any of the paragraphs, I have to first select the paragraphs. So the first type of selector I'm going to talk about is the element selector. So if I want to style the paragraphs, I bring the selector, the name of the selector, which is the P for the paragraphs. I bring a curly braces, hit enter to bring the ending, the closing one downwards. And the next process is for me to state the property I want to apply on that particular element. So what property do I want to apply on that particular element? I want to change the color. So after specifying the element, I bring a colon, and the next part is for me to state the value. So if I want a red color, I state red, and the last thing is to add a semicolon. I hit save, and all the paragraphs within my page will have a color of red, because I'm telling my CSS file to apply the color red to all the paragraphs on my page. So this is an element selector. We are selecting an element to apply a property on it. If I have another property to apply on them, I hit enter. So for example, if I want to change the font size, type font hyphen size, bring a colon, and let's say I make it 25 px, end it with a semicolon, hit save, and then the size of all the paragraphs increases to 25 pixels. So this is the element selector. The next selector I'll talk about is the class selector. The class selector. Now, when we use the element selector, you realize that when we apply the color and font size for the paragraph element, all the paragraphs on our page changed to red and had a font size of 25 pixels. What if we didn't want to change all the paragraphs, but the only paragraph we wanted to change was the second paragraph? There should be a way of identifying the second paragraph, only the second paragraph, and selecting only the second paragraph, so that when we apply the properties to that particular selector, only the second paragraph is changed. That is where the class selector comes in. So as I said, we have to give an identity to the second paragraph so that it will only identify that particular paragraph. So I will go back to my HTML page, go to the second paragraph, and add an attribute called class to the tag. So I'll add the attribute called class to the tag and give it any identity I want. So I can call it paragraph 2. So if I come to my CSS file, I can now specifically select that particular paragraph with its identity. So I can now use the identity that I gave to that particular paragraph. Open a curly bracket, hit enter to bring it. But if I do it this way, there will be a problem because the CSS declaration I've made right now is telling it to look for a tag, an element called paragraph. So I have to do something to it to make it look for a class with an identity of paragraph. So right before the name, I use a period or a full stop. So with a period or full stop before that particular name, before that particular selector, it will go into that particular index.html, the HTML file, and look for a class with that particular identity. So I can now give it a property with color, let's say blue. I now save it. So that there was no change because the identity I gave to it was not paragraph but rather paragraph 2. So I save it again. So you see that the color of the second paragraph changed to blue. Now when I made a mistake to it, my web page didn't present any error message. So you should bear in mind that when there are errors within our declarations, the web page wouldn't show an error but would rather ignore that particular declaration. So that is one thing that we have to notice. So in case we apply a particular property to an element or a class and it is not showing, one of the problems might be that we have made a mistake with the selectors. I'll use this opportunity to explain something about the class selector. You see that we had a paragraph selector and it had a property with color and a value as red. So all the paragraphs on a page had the color of red. This is also a paragraph, but this one is having a color of blue because class selectors takes precedence. It doesn't matter the order at which it is arranged. So if I cut this one and place it here and save it back again, it is still blue because the class selector is always going to take precedence. So it is not like the paragraph selector, the element selector comes second, so that one will override the first one. No, between the element selector and the class selector is more specific, and for that matter it will take precedence over that particular element selector. Another thing I'll explain about the class selector is that for the class selector, you can give the same identity to a different element on the page and it will work perfectly. So for example, if I want to change the third paragraph to also blue, then I can also apply the same identity, the same name I give to that particular class to, so I can give the same name to that particular third paragraph. So I come to my HTML page, come to the third paragraph, and I can give the same class to that particular paragraph. So I name it paragraph 2. And when I save it, it also changes the third paragraph to uh, blue. So for the class selectors, or for the class attribute, multiple tags or multiple elements on the page can have the same identity. But the next selector we are going to talk about will use a different attribute. That attribute can only be given to one specific tag, one unique tag. I cannot give the same identity to a different tag. But for the class selectors, it is possible for you to do that. So in case there is a style that you want to apply to multiple elements on the page, you use the class selectors. The next selector I'll talk about is the ID selector. So just like a class selector, if you want specific elements on the page to be selected and styled, then one of the things you can use is a class selector. Another one you can use is an ID selector. So if I want to change this paragraph, the first paragraph, I can go back to my HTML, look for the first paragraph, which is this one. Instead of giving it an attribute of class, I rather give an attribute of ID, and then I can give it an ID as paragraph 1. Save it, go back to my styles, and now I can specify that particular ID and style it. So I gave it an identity of paragraph 1. I bring my curly brackets, bring it down, specify my property color, and let me give it green and my semicolon. Save it, and you see that nothing happens. Nothing happens because, again, it is trying to look for an element called paragraph. It is not looking for an ID called paragraph. So it goes through the HTML page and it realizes that there is no element called paragraph 1. So to be able to tell it to look for an ID with paragraph 1, I have to put a hash symbol before that particular identity. So I now save it, and my first paragraph changes to green. So to specify a class selector, you use a period. To specify an ID selector, you use the hash before the identity or before the name of the selector. So now let's look at what is happening here. We have a paragraph with a property of color and a value of red. We have a class with a property of color and a value of blue. We have an ID selector with a color of green. So the class selector and the ID selector changed a paragraph. So it means that those two have precedence over the elements selectors. So the class selector has precedence over the element selector. The ID selector also has precedence over the element selector. But again, the ID selector is also more specific than the class selector. So in case of any conflict within the ID selector and the class selector, the ID selector will also take precedence over that particular selector. So if I head to my HTML page and give the second paragraph, if I also give it an ID of paragraph 1 and save it, you see that paragraph 1 changes to green. So it has a class of paragraph 2, it has an ID of paragraph 1, but within our styles, the ID selector is going to take precedence over the class selector and apply that particular property if there is a conflict between them. So that is the order of precedence for the class, the ID, and the element selectors. When implementing CSS, an advice is to avoid an ID selector as much as possible. So if you can entirely avoid an ID selector, you should go for it, and rather use ID selectors for JavaScript since it is more specific. So I'll take away my ID selector and leave the other two. Okay, so what if I wanted to apply these same properties and their values to the paragraph and my H1 heading? What do I do? So let me take away my class selector. So what do? I bring a comma here and add the other selector or the element that I wanted to apply it to. So I save it now, and you see that the heading and the paragraphs within my page changes to red, and the font size also changes to 25 pixels. So if you want to group elements and style them, you can also separate them with a comma. If there are more elements you want to apply the same properties and values to them, you just bring a comma and then you add it. So I can add the H2, save it, and the H2s also have a color of red and 25 pixels. The next demonstration, I'll first go back to my HTML page. Now, with this page, you realize that within the main tag, there's a section, and within the section tag, there is an H2 and a paragraph tag. You can also use nested selections. Okay, so within my main, there is a section, and within my section, there is an H2 tag. So if I wanted to style this H2 tag, I can, if I want to style the H2 tags, because when you look at the other sections, it still follows the same principle. Within the main, there's a section, and within the section, there's an H2. Within the main, there's a section, and within the section, there's an H2. So I can style the three of them using the nested approach. So let me take away this, save it. So what was happening? Within my main, I had a section, and within my section, I had an H2. So I bring my curly braces, hit enter, and then now I can apply a color of, let's say, blue. Save it, and you realize that the H2s are now blue. So you realize that the H2s are now blue. So within my main, there was a section, and within my section, there was an H2. Notice that I don't use any comma between it. So if I go back to my HTML, within my main, there are sections, and within my sections, there are H2s. So I'm styling all the H2s inside the section that is also found in my main tag. Another thing I'll talk about is a universal selector, which selects everything. So if you want to select everything, then you can use a universal selector. So to specify a universal selector, I use an asterisk, bring my curly braces, so I can now give it a property. So I give it a property of font family and then the value of monospace. So if I want to change the font, I give it a font family. We talk about all these later in our lessons. So it changes all the fonts on my page to monospace. So the asterisk is used for a universal selector. If I didn't want to select everything on my page and wanted to select, let's say, everything in the main part of our HTML, I could have also brought main here before the asterisk, save it, and only the main part of our web page will have a font family of monospace. The heading part of our web page will stay the same, and only the main part, everything within the main part of our web page changes to monospace. So that is the asterisk. It is a universal selector for everything. When we look at our HTML, the body tag is also an element on the web page. So we can also use the body as an element selector. So when we are selecting, you can also use the body as an element selector, and you can change the color to, let's say, yellow. Save it, and the body part changes to yellow. So you see that the H2s retained their colors, because this one is more specific to the body tag. So the main is within the body tag, the section is within the main, the H2 is within the section. So this is also more specific than the body. That's why they also retained their colors.